Welcome back to the Damien Richardson, welcome back, I should say, to DamienRichardson.Online. And I have a great guest today who's taken time out from his busy schedule to join us for a little while, which we're very appreciative for. It is, of course, the Honourable Senator Malcom Roberts, the Maverick Senator, could we say, from Queensland. Malcolm, welcome to the show.
I'm a Maverick now, am I? That's better than denier and tinfoil hat wearer, I guess. So
yeah, that's how the mainstream would describe you. I don't know why I'm reverting to type as well, Malcolm, but there you go. Now, I'm concerned, Malcolm, I want to start this from very early on. I'm concerned that I've only just started this podcast not long ago, and I'm frightened that maybe it'll be taken off the air because of the disinformation bill that the Labor Party are currently trying to get through the Parliament. Yeah,
podcasters are included, Damien. You're absolutely right. You know, funny thing is that dating sites are also included. I don't know what misinformation and disinformation you get from dating sites.
Are you saying that to me specifically, Malcolm?
Sorry?
Are you saying that to me specifically? Did you?
No, I'm not inviting you out on a date, Damien.
No, I thought maybe you thought I was using them. You had a look at me and thought, oh, hang on, this guy's clearly on these sites.
Yeah, it is a big threat. This is a really serious threat. And there are several questions. I'm sure we'll get into it, but the government is making out that it's not responsible. It's putting the responsibility on the tech sites, and the tech sites will always have the government to back them up. So they're really washing their hands of control. Try to appear to be washing their hands of control, but this is government's control all over it. It's a really serious threat.
So what are they trying to do? What are they saying? What is the problem they've identified, and what are they trying to rectify? Because it's such a nebulous idea. Oh, misinformation and disinformation. What does that mean? It just means my opinion's different than the government's, therefore it's wrong?
Well, misinformation is a threat to society from misinformation. Disinformation is where it's intentional. So misinformation is unintentional, and disinformation is intentional. And then there's also a serious threat to society as well. But it's basically any way that they can think of that can harm society, harm an individual, harm a group of people. So it's very, very broad and very, very open. So that means they have basically unlimited powers. And the key thing is who determines the truth is not defined. It's not stated. So, but it's not ACMA. So if it's not ACMA, who is it?
Yeah, who is it? Is it a regulatory authority that we don't have yet? Is this just an excuse for them to build another bureaucracy?
Well, that's part of it, I think, but they want the ability to have independent fact checkers, a third-party fact checker. So that will be where the sting is, I'd say.
And who would be the third-party fact checker be? Like I say, a body that hasn't been appointed yet by government. And they'll say it's from arm's length of government, yet it'll be a government appointment paid for by the taxpayers' expense.
Correct. But speaking of the government, you know, they're the biggest purveyors of misinformation and disinformation as it is. And they're exempt from misinformation and disinformation. So we'll use what APRA did and what various agencies did, Department of Health. This just builds on what actually happened during the COVID mismanagement, you know, where the Department of Health fed material through to the Department of Home Affairs, who fed material through to Facebook and Instagram. But we also noticed that while the Department of Health denied interacting directly and always going through Department of Home Affairs, we also know that Craig Kelly was shut down directly from the Department of Health. So this is basically it's saying that here's some pretty strong, severe powers on freedom of speech, but no one is really going to be held accountable. So you can't blame the government because they'll say it's Facebook, and if you try to blame Facebook, they'll say it's not us. We're just working for the government according to the government regulations. That's what's so difficult to pin down.
I remember in the pandemic in Victoria, women being arrested. A pregnant woman in particular in Ballarat was arrested in a home for a Facebook post that she'd put online.
Yeah, I think, wasn't she arrested because it was inciting attendance at a demonstration?
Yeah.
A protest rally?
Yeah, but it was in a regional area that didn't even have the lockdowns that Melbourne had at that particular point in time. So I don't think she was even contravening whatever imprimatur was coming from the government at that particular point in time.
Since when has that stopped Dan Andrews?
Well, this is it. So
rubber bullets firing at people.
So what's the necessity of this legislation? So that people like that would be punitively punished, because even you say they're talking about major corporations on big platforms, but individuals too face fines of up to $250,000. I'm
Correct.
sorry, but you have to laugh because it's just so perverted. A $250,000. How could I possibly take on board a $250,000 for contravening an act that what sounds like it's not even going to necessarily make sense? So in the end, what's going to happen is people will self-censor. Well, this is what the government thinks, so I better not go against what the government thinks.
That's exactly
because I might
it.
find myself falling foul of a department.
That's exactly it. And I've noticed, for example, I've put up some sarcastic posts and some humorous posts. And when sometimes people have told me they have gone to repost that and they get banned or they get taken down. So there'll be one rule for politicians, because they're afraid of coming at us in knocking us off completely, because that'll be political discourse that's being interfered with. But there'll be another rule for others.
Well, they say they're going to have an exemption for satire. How do you prove whether something is satire or not?
That's it. That's it. The definition will be so broad or so loose that it'll be just indiscriminately applied.
It's always like the process will become the punishment, because the process will be so difficult to prove these things in the first place or not, but you will be tied up potentially in a legal battle for years to prove your innocence.
Right. So you're correct. It'll be censorship
against the deep pockets of the state.
Yep.
So what legitimate
who are purveying misinformation and disinformation?
Exactly. Well, so what legitimate concerns do the state have? It is becoming increasingly difficult to govern, isn't it? So what legitimate concerns do the state have, Malcolm? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
I don't think they've got any legitimate concerns.
So
this is just about control. The whole of COVID was mismanaged, Damien, as you know, because the objective was never caring for people's health. The objective was never health. It was control and wealth transfer. That's all it was. And that's why the deceit was so strong. And that's what we've seen. It is important to understand that the bill has not been introduced. It's into Parliament as such. It's been introduced for consultation, publicly available. So there is a site. There are two sites you can go to give your views on this. So anybody can give their views. The first one is information integrity at infrastructure.gov.au. So that's information integrity, one word, at infrastructure.gov.au.
Why is it?
So have your say, because we defeated the cash ban because we got in touch with people in the grassroots members of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party and asked them to put pressure on their Liberal and Labor MPs in Parliament, and they did so. And they were so threatened by that, and the revolt was so strong that Liberal and Labor consigned it to a committee, and I moved a motion to get rid of it from the Senate, and we got rid of it from the Senate. That was the cash ban bill.
You talk about the cash ban bill. Do you think it's a matter of time before that comes back? So, like, it's a temporary reprieve, isn't it? I mean, we have to continually fight these battles because there will still be moves to get rid of cash in a more complete fashion than what it was before. I think they were trying to say you could only have up to $10,000 or something before in the cash ban you're talking about. But we're talking now really moving towards the complete removal of cash, aren't we? Replaced with a digital currency.
Correct. And the digital identity bill, which my office blew out into the open 18 months ago, that is a pathway to getting rid of cash. They're wanting to get rid of cash. If you look, I'm traveling around central Queensland, rural and regional and small towns, as well as major provincial cities, and the access of cash is decreasing considerably. So we're saying to people everywhere we go, we'll pay with cash because we want to keep cash alive. Cash is really important to keep alive. So they'll come at us and keep coming at us. The number of bank branches is dwindling dramatically. I think it's decreased by about 60% in 20 years. That's roughly. And they're making even ATMs disappear. And then they're forcing people to get onto digital transactions, which gives two things. It gives control through digital currency, and it also gives banks fees for every transaction where you used to pay cash and no fee. Now you'll be paying a fee, and you'll be controlled in what you can and cannot buy. So if you've got a four-wheel drive, they might say something like, "Well, you've got a four-wheel drive, you can't get a house loan. Sell your four-wheel drive and you get the house loan."
Do you think it's a forlorn hope? Because if they just say, well, cash is no longer, and they have a moratorium at some point in time, I'm sure you can hand your cash in and be given some digital credit commensurate with whatever the cash is supposed to be worth. It'll be impossible for us to fight back against that, won't it?
I think that the government with COVID mismanagement has overreached, and people have woken up. Up until COVID, probably about 5% of the people were awake as to what's going on. Now we've got about 15%, and a lot of others asking questions. So I think it's always important to remember, Damien, that at the top of we're a constitutional monarchy. What that means is that the monarch, the king or queen, does not rule over us. They serve our constitution. And Australia is the only country in the world where the constitution was voted on by the people in the first instance, and the only people who can change our constitution are the people. The people who determine the government are the people. And so we've got to remember that power. And what's happened is people have fallen asleep. And so they don't realise how much power they have. They don't realise that they appoint a member of parliament, as senators, to represent them and do their work for them. And that's what we've got to get back to. The people waking up, instead of voting Labor or Liberal, vote for third parties. And I'm serious about that, not just because I'm in One Nation, but Tim, the media is aligned. You watch the lead up to an election. Vote Liberal, vote Labor, vote Liberal, vote Labor, vote Liberal, Labor. Only two choices, and the policies are the same. We've got to get back to the key issue, which is that the people run this country. We've been asleep, and therefore the government has taken it over. And so they're doing things without any responsibility at all. And so they're going well beyond their boundaries, and they're getting away with it. The way to stop it, so I'm answering your question about, is it a forlorn hope? No, it's not a forlorn hope, so long as the people wake up. So what we're asking people to do is share my videos, make sure that people share my videos with people who've never heard of me, never heard of One Nation, or don't think much of One Nation, or don't think about One Nation. Share them out, because we're getting the truth out there. So educate people, talk to your friends, talk to your workmates, talk to your relatives, talk to family. Just get the information out there that we have got to wake our country up. We've got to wake the people up. The answer is in the people, and I'm not thinking it's a forlorn hope. I'm thinking that if we can wake people up in time, that'll be it.
Michelle Rowland is the communications minister. She says too, it's about protecting democracy. I'm so cynical of hearing that concept. Now, you're just given a great argument where you think democracy is still in balance and still in play, but we've really got to fight for it. We're now at an epoch where we really have to fight for it, maybe more than ever. But it becomes very difficult to even believe in democracy, isn't it? Because there's just a deep state that sits underneath it, and all of these things are introduced no matter which party is in government.
That's right. The Digital Identity Bill, for example, was introduced not into Parliament, but introduced into having discussions about it by the Morrison government. But we had no delusions that it would come in straight after the election through the Labor Party, and the Labor Party has been talking about that. But it's very important to understand that Digital Identity Bill has its roots in the World Economic Forum digital transformation policy. And so what I'm really saying is that people are waking up to that. So we've got to keep going. Democracy, the totalitarian government is where the people are afraid of government. In a true democracy, the government is afraid of the people. We've got to get people back to that point where it is a true democracy. In a true democracy, Damien, no one fears freedom of speech. No one fears anything people say. You can call me any name. It doesn't matter. That's just your opinion. But in a dictatorship, it does matter.
I called you a maverick senator. There was no name calling there, Malcolm. I said it lovingly. But there's a
Top Gun.
There's no way out of this in many respects, is there? Because there's a managerial globalist class sitting over this structure, which is going to be a universalist structure. And there's what alternative do we realistically have against that eventuality?
Well, let's take a look at the roots of the globalist government. You're absolutely correct, but there is an alternative. We originally lived under feudalism, where the lord of the manor, the baron, the local baron, gave us a patch of dirt for us to eke out a living, but he took most of the fruits of our work, and he sold that, and he made a lot of money out of it. Then we had the Industrial Revolution, and we had wonderful, cheap energy. And that gave us huge increase in productivity, which gave us a reduction in prices of goods in real terms, and a bountiful cornucopia of huge, diverse products that we could, and services. And that led to the development of the middle class, and the hierarchy lost control of the middle class. What they want to do is bring us back under control. And there are two basic things, two basic systems that are required for structuring human society. One is the family unit, and the other is nation state. So what the globalists want to do, they're now in charge of BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They're in charge through World Economic Forum and the United Nations of various policies, various countries. Well, actually, they're not in charge of them. They work through politicians who have sold us out. They're treasonous politicians, just a handful in each party. But what happens is they're trying to get control. They're trying to smash the nation state, put in place an unelected socialist global governance, and then you'll have no real say. And they're also trying to smash the family. They're also trying to smash property rights. This is the same thing that a communist dictator does to get control of a country. They're just putting the communist playbook into practice. So you're absolutely correct. This is all about a globalist push. But you'll find that throughout history, there have been exceptions where people have woken up and been able to preserve their freedoms. Ultimately, if we do fall, it'll fall into anarchy, because you can't manage something like that. One person or one small dictatorship cannot manage everything as well as a free society. And eventually it'll fall into anarchy, and then you'll get democracy back again. But how many people will die in the meantime? So the point is, let's wake up and prevent it happening.
It's so many things you're bringing up there, Malcolm. Do you think we should pull out of the United Nations?
Yes. I called for that in my first speech in Parliament. I called for an exit. I nicknamed it Oz Exit, #Oz Exit, because that was just after Brexit occurred. And people didn't think you could pull out of Brexit, but one person or two people, Nigel Farage had someone helping him, two people pulled Britain out of that. And their communication was broken. And what they used to do was go from country town to country town and just wake the people up. And they got out of Brexit. Brexit was a victory.
You're talking about Nigel Farage, and it was just a bit of a sidetrack here. Do you know that overnight I just heard that he lost access to his bank accounts? He's been barred from banking.
Yeah, I saw that this morning. And there have been people in this country barred from banking. They're called debanked.
Debanked.
Yes.
But people not of a significant stature to waken people. But Nigel Farage is a major figure on the international scene since his influence in the Brexit vote and being this is overreach, isn't it, by the globalists to ban him from actually being able to bank?
Well and truly, but it's a form of control. Overreach is a form of control, Damien. And always beneath control, there is fear. They're terrified of Nigel Farage. If you look at the World Economic Forum, one of the golden rules in politics is you don't mention your adversaries, don't give them any free airtime.
Yep.
The World Economic Forum, about 6 months ago, put out a page and headlined it Strategic Bulletin or something like that, Strategic Strategy. And they mentioned in that, it's just half a page on their website, they mentioned that some countries, and they specifically named Australia, turning redneck, racist, homophobe, transphobe, Islamophobe, etc. And they mentioned Australia was the only country mentioned. And then they mentioned one nation amongst Australia, because we've been building the World Economic Forum, we've been building the UN, and so they could see that we're a threat. So what I'm saying is we're being effective because we've rattled them. So that's not to downplay their impact. But if you have a look at the European Union, what Nigel Farage did was hugely important for several reasons. First of all, the United Nations template for unelected socialist global governance is the EU. They've said that. The EU is it looks like a democracy, but it's not a democracy at all. It's run by bureaucrats behind the doors in Brussels. So Nigel Farage, that's the first thing. The EU is very important, and they're starting to see cracks in it. Will other countries pull out? They've been talking about it. So that's a threat to the global governance. The second thing is that Nigel Farage did that with one mate helping him by going from town to town, and they didn't need social media. They just did it by waking people up. And we can do the same in Australia. So Nigel Farage is a huge threat, and they've got to try and shut him down. But you watch, there'll be some form of help that comes to Nigel. through the people. I don't know what it is, but I'll bet that happens.
There's all these inconsistencies in this sort of lurch for equality, because on one hand, as a private business, you're not allowed to not bake someone a gay wedding cake, but you're allowed to deny a man access to a financial institution.
Well, that's the whole thing. There's nothing consistent at all, because control bypasses human respect, human love, human compassion. Control bypasses rules. There are only rules for some people, and there's certainly no rules for the elites, the self-proclaimed elites. So, of course, and the other thing, Damien, is that leads to the inconsistencies is those rules are put down to smash families, smash children. You look at some of the things that are going on. Transgender, gender dysphoria is a normal thing for many adolescents, but now it's been turned into a mutilating, anti-human approach. We've got kids being groomed for pedophilia, kids being groomed for online sex, kids being groomed for all kinds of things, indoctrination, because the agenda is to get control, and the agenda is to smash the family and to smash the nation state and to steal your property rights and to smash religion. This is the copybook, the playbook of communists. And communists, that they parade themselves as being for the people, but they never give people control under communism. Communism is a dictatorship.
The rainbow flag is a sign of the new imperialist master on the block, isn't it? Because it's everywhere now. You'll tear down the Union Jack or the Australian flag with the Southern Cross and the Union Jack in the corner, and the rainbow flag will go up in its stead.
But really what's going on, Damien, it's the same old playbook. Division, that's the first thing. And you silence people who speak up against you. So if someone speaks up against mutilating children to change their gender, they're described as transphobic. And so what happens, someone who dares question the white and black Aboriginal industry is described as a racist. So it's all about divide and control. Divide and control, separate and isolate. And what they want to do, they did it during COVID. They isolated individual doctors who were doing their job. And then the majority of doctors followed like sheep, but individual doctors who stood up were pilloried and smashed. And so it's always about divide and control and make the individual feel as though they're in a tiny minority when they're not. When we've been speaking up, we're probably one of the first to speak up about gender dysphoria and how they're using it to mutilate children. And there's so many parents who just contact us and say thank you, because now that they were thinking that they were unusual, but no, the parents' rights are very, very important. And so it's a matter of recognizing that we're not in the minority, we're in the majority. Just because other people haven't got the courage to speak up doesn't mean it's in a minority. So many people are thinking on the same issues along the lines you and I are discussing right now.
This disinformation, misinformation bill on those lines, exactly what you're saying there, is to stop people from getting morale from hearing their voice spoken, so they do feel isolated, so they're much less likely to act as a result.
Yes, and you know, we just discussed a little while ago about who determines truth. It's not defined, so that leaves it very, very open, and also the structure is giving government the opportunity to wash its hands of this. Whereas in reality is pulling the strings behind, because the social media companies will say we're doing this because of government, and government will say no, it's not us at all. There's a voluntary code of practices to social media companies, and so there's no real accountability, which is a sign of a very arrogant government. But if the people wake up, as they're starting to, then we will see that the government will start pulling back.
Yeah, because I know with this platform, and it hasn't been going for that long, DamienRichardson.Online, and a few people have come to it, particularly there's been people really concerned about the rollout of 5G, et cetera, and they've got legitimate concerns, intelligent people. And you see, I'll put up a post from someone I've spoken to, and then someone else will get involved because they would have heard it and go, the same thing's happening in my jurisdiction, the same thing's happening my local council level. And suddenly they want to come on the platform as well. So you can see how this rolls on into being a pocket of resistance for a globalist program that's being rolled out at the government level. So you can see why this is just purely about power and having to shut down alternative sources of power.
Yes, it's all about control. And that you don't have control without having power. So that's exactly what it's about. And we've had people from all over the world contact us and say, thank you so much for the work you're doing on digital identity, on digital transformation, because we've been waking up in Canada, waking up in America. So It's really important to understand that the globalists want to shut everyone down and isolate individuals and keep us thinking that we're in the minority, but we're really in the majority. There are people all over the world who are saying exactly what you and I are discussing now. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, my concern too is that we don't have any institutional support. So we have this conversation as an individual, and obviously you're a senator in the federal parliament, but you're an isolated voice in many respects. There's a few other notable exceptions that are also voices. But you talk about our constitutional democracy, and that sounds great, but Charles III is the head of our democracy, and Charles III is an absolute unadulterated globalist. So what hope can we possibly take from that? Is it possible to still operate within that perversity itself, maybe? I don't know.
Well, Charles III cannot control us. We're a constitutional monarchy, which means the king or queen, in this case the king, serves the Constitution. And as I think I said a little while ago, I've said it so many times in the last few weeks, that we're the only country in the world where the people voted for the Constitution. So the Constitution can only be changed by a vote of the majority of people and majority in a majority of states. So the people control it. So King Charles III, he has been in a very stupid position he's put himself in the past because of his comments in favor of the globalists. But I think as a king, he will make sure that he serves the Constitution, because he doesn't have any say over us. He doesn't have any rule over us. He serves the Constitution. I think it's a wonderful system. We are effectively a republic now. That might annoy people, but we are effectively a republic now, because a republic is a government of the people, by the people, through laws. And the king or queen does not reign over us, so we're not a monarchy. We're a constitutional monarchy, which is where the king or queen serves the Constitution, serves the people. They have reserved powers only. So I'm not terribly worried about King Charles at all. If anything, he's probably done the royal family disservice with his past behaviour, but I think he's starting to tidy that up. But he's not going to overreach. He can't overreach. There's no power for him to overreach. The supreme power in our country is the people. And what we've got to do is get the people to realise that that the politicians serve them. We've let that go. We're not holding people accountable. We've got to get the people back in charge of the country. So the people vote alternative parties into power, not just Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor. Get someone decent that'll work for you.
You're very close to the source of power, Malcolm, from virtue of your office. And you say there's a small group of elites within each party that are globalists. They're interested in servicing the interests of the deep state. Would you say Michelle Rowland, who's actually the communications minister in charge of this disinformation, misinformation legislation or proposed legislation, is cognizant of the role she is playing in bringing about a globalist revolution, or is she what we would call a useful idiot to the cause?
I don't know, and I don't make statements unless I've got the information to back it up, the data behind it. But the majority of politicians can be described as ignorant, stupid, and gutless, not conspirators. So that they don't have the power. The majority of parliamentarians are told how to vote. They sometimes enter the Senate chamber not knowing what they're even going to be voting on, but they're told how to vote by the party hacks. Even some of the whips and so on in the party offices that are passing out the orders, I think they're given instructions from other people. The power brokers behind the scenes, I don't think many of the power brokers are actually members of parliament. They're behind the scenes in the parties. They're the ones who give the running orders. Michael Photius, for example, was looked upon as a very big power broker behind Malcolm Turnbull and many of the wet Liberals from New South Wales, and even federally. So it's those kind of people, from what I understand, who control what happens in the Liberal Party. It's those kinds of people who control what happens in the Labor Party, and they're all dictated to by people of that kind of position. So they're not in public. So I'm guessing here that Michelle, I won't make any comment on Michelle Rowland, but I'm guessing she is mainly ignorant, stupid, and gutless, just like most of them. She's taking her orders, and she doesn't know. She'll honestly be thinking, is my guess, she's honestly thinking this is necessary.
So many questions, Mark. Is this something to do with Emily's List? Because the reality is Emily's List came along and it was like taken on board by the Labor Party, and the idea was that there needs to be more females in government. There wasn't enough, and they needed to be given safe seats so they could be secure in their role within government. Now we've just seen a plethora of women come in, particularly to the Labor Party. There's always pressure on the Liberal Party to follow suit. Obviously, your party was started by a woman, and your leader still is a woman. But nonetheless, this influence has undermined the integrity of parties, and we're seeing that play out now, aren't we? Because it actually undermines the men involved as well, because they know they're ultimately supplicants to quotas.
Well, Emily's List is an international entity, so it's very powerful in America in particular.
Yep.
So I don't need to make any comments really about Emily's List specifically.
But it's in the Labor Party too. It's in the Australian Labor Party. Yeah,
definitely. But there's nothing special about that that I see. It's not a very. It's an inhuman organisation. They're not pushing a human agenda. They're pushing an anti-human agenda. Now, when it comes to women and men, I've always had the position that men and women are different. And there are some ways women are superior to men. In other ways, men are superior to women. Physically, men are superior to women generally. But women have wonderful different perspectives. So I think like Pauline Hanson, for example, is a wonderful example of a woman who's got leadership qualities, who's very strong, very courageous, has enormous integrity, doesn't get pushed around. I know some people say she's got more balls than most of the men in the Liberal Party and most of the men in the Labor Party. And you know, so
not the men in One Nation, though, mate. Not the men in One Nation.
No, the men in One Nation have got balls. Don't worry about that. So you look at women like Nampa Jimpa Price, Senator Nampa Jimpa Price, wonderful, strong, intelligent, capable, and courageous. You've got Karen Little. So it's a matter of.
But these are the exceptions that prove the rule, aren't they? Are these the exceptions that prove the rule?
Well, there are many men who are not worth feeding in Parliament. There are some women who are not worth feeding in Parliament. So I'll leave that for the voters to decide. But
absolutely.
I'm just pointing out that I don't make decisions based upon whether it's a woman or a man. If it's a physical job, then the man will get the preference. But if it's a job where you don't need physical strength, then the best person for the job should be getting the job.
Now, I have to let you go, Malcolm. I understand that. But before I do, I just want to ask you this last question, because I think, is there some cynical idea that this bill, although I believe it was probably proposed before the Voice seemed to have been taking a real hit in the public's mind, because it looks like the Voice is not necessarily going to get over the line. Is that why the government want to bring about control? Because honestly, the government had all of the major sporting bodies, all of the major codes, all of the mainstream media outlets, ultimately, maybe Fox was an exception, supporting and championing the Voice, yet it's taken a nosedive in the opinion polls. So
I think you're giving the government too much credit for intelligence. This is just lurching from one mess to the next. What we've seen here, this is just implementing what some of the controls that were put in place during COVID on the run. You know, COVID itself, the overall tenor of COVID was determined decades ago. The mismanagement of COVID was not human stupidity. It was never about people's health. It was about control of wealth, and that was put in place decades ago. APRA was formed in 2008 to set up control over doctors and be unaccountable for what it's doing. We also saw that the control of Facebook posts and Instagram, social media, from the Department of Home Affairs. I think that was probably done on the fly. When we woke up to it, Senator Antic and I woke up to it. We've seen the Department of Health censor Craig Kelly directly. So I think this is just putting in place powers, and they're putting them in place deliberately. And I think that they probably have been cooking this for some time. They're putting them in place deliberately to make sure that they can formalize, and they're doing it very cleverly by making it ill-defined as to who actually does control the shots. But the important thing to remember is that people are in charge of our country, and the people have a say through information integrity at infrastructure.gov.au. So get the people to make contributions, make submissions on this bill, and tell the Labor Party and Liberal Party and National Party to get the hell out of our social media.
They've got until August the 6th. Is that right? You've got until August the 6th to make a submission?
I don't know. I'll take your word for that. I wasn't advisor of the date. I was just advisor of the link.
Yep.
But have your say, because politicians take note of their power brokers, but they take note ultimately, if they're given the opportunity, of what the people are saying. We've seen that with the cash ban bill. We've seen that in so many ways. The people need to get back in charge of this country, and that is up to every single person to tell as many people as they can about what's going on, to share the information about the globalists. It's up to people like yourself and myself to keep talking about the globalists. Pauline Hanson first talked about Agenda 21 in 1996. It was released in 1992. Both the Liberal Party and Labor Party were implementing it, but Pauline came out of the blue and just bounced it right out into the open. So we've got to keep doing that. As I said, share my videos. I'm asking people to share my videos around so that people can help wake people up. Also, I'm listening to around Queensland. We're going to be visiting. We've visited many towns of provincial Queensland. We're going to be visiting Rockhampton. I'm in Blackwater now. We're visiting Rocky, Yeppoon. Then we'll be going to Mackay, Serena, Clermont, Townsville, Emerald, Longreach, Charleville, Roma, Mitchell. Or small towns, big towns. We're in the town of Monto, which has only got a couple of thousand people. And we've been in towns with 100,000 people. So it's important to get the word out.
Democracy in action.
Yes, listening in action, because we need a voice, because the voice is already there. Nampa Jimpa Price is in Parliament. We don't need a voice for Aboriginals to succeed, and she's already succeeding. Karen Little to succeed. What we need is politicians with ears. We need an ear, not a voice. We need an ears.
And I think there's 11 parliamentarians that identify as being Indigenous in the federal parliament. So, I mean,
correct.
There's already a
voice.
We've
got 5%.
And what if their voice was in contravention of what the voice had decided? Then where are we?
Exactly. So, but that's why it's, and well, look at the communist who's behind it, Mayo, who's one of the leading lights in that. He has said that if a politician goes against the voice, they'll be smashed. Well, that's not the way democracy works. That tells you exactly everything you need to know about the voice. It is a means of totalitarian control, and to put it beyond the reach, they can never be taken out and never have any accountability, because they'll be tied in the Constitution.
He's trying to temper his rhetoric now that it's taken a bit of a hit in the polls. He says Australia Day is safe. Australia Day is safe. I love Australia Day. Malcom Roberts, thanks so much for joining me at DamienRichardson.Online.
You're welcome. We'll be doing whatever we can to protect you, keeping your independent voice alive, Damien. Keep going, mate.
Thanks, buddy.